So, good morning and welcome to Spacebar, mindful pauses for conscious conversations. And my name is Yvette. I am the daughter.
And my name is Linda, and I'm the mom.
So, welcome to our listeners. And today we hope to cover two topics in today's episode, with the intention of the second topic leading to our first guest with our next episode. So our topics this morning would be growth versus happiness, and then diving into ketamine and using ketamine therapy as a way for growth to facilitate itself on a faster trajectory. I'll put it that way. So with that, let's start with growth versus happiness. And before we began our podcast this morning, we were actually talking about our time living and with me working in the ashram at the Amrit Yoga Institute. And, talking about, because you're there to grow, the purpose of being in an ashram environment is for spiritual growth, which is also tied directly to personal growth. And there's also the dabbling of happiness in there. But I remember that for many people who came through our doors back then, and I was there for 3 years, but there were so many people who felt that in order to grow, you had to suffer. And being in an ashram environment, you were there to kill the ego. And that was almost like a painful death for many people in that perception, which that became a conversation topic for darshan one day with Gurudev. But with that, Mom, what is your take on growth versus happiness?
Well, I think happiness comes from personal growth. And I think more than anything, it comes from spiritual growth. That's what we were there for. And the darshans that we had that are like conversations with the teachings that Amrit Desai did, those were opportunities because afterwards we could ask questions. And you have those aha moments in there of, oh my God, that's what happened in my life. And it could be something that happened to you 2 years or 3 years before, but all of a sudden, because of whatever it was he was teaching, that memory would drop in, and then there would be a moment of, let's just say, enlightenment. Mm-hmm. You were enlightened about the situation where you weren't at the time that it actually happened. And those little moments by moments, I'm speaking for myself because for me, it was a gradual awakening. Some people have like this, they're like, they see colors, they're all kinds of, they see the auras around trees. That's not the way that it happened for me. Mine was just a little by little by little. And it happened over the years. But once I got to the ashram, it was a more intensified. But you really, happiness emerges out of that. You're not making it happen. It's happening naturally. Mm-hmm. Because your relationships are improving, your relationships at work, relationships with your friends, everything. It's amazing what it does.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I did a lot of personal growth before I went there. That was the icing on the cake, and I finished it off, but it's never done. You are always on a path, and we really are. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's very, very true. And, even Gurudev, Amrit Desai, he'll be 91 in October. And, Gurudev means beloved teacher. And it's a term that you can hear other people use who've ever had a spiritual teacher that comes from the East. And he will tell you still that he is a student first and a teacher second, that even at his age, he's still learning. He's here to find and to achieve enlightenment. And it's a layer by layer experience. It's not something that you that they can record in a book and say, okay, step 1 is this, step 2 is that, step 3 is that. So I think it's an interesting thing. But, when you talk about growth versus happiness, for me, growth is an inward journey, and happiness is something that we as a culture are raised in the pursuit of happiness. And it's
Oh,
in a
yes.
pursuit of happiness to go to find something outside of ourselves to make us happy, when in the continued growth process and in that continued growth practice and exploration, you find happiness in the present moment. You can find happiness in, a glass of wine or watching kids play in a park. But when you can sit back and just feel content with your content, that to me is the simplification of happiness, because it comes from within you.
That I always say happiness is an inside job.
I like that, Mom.
It
That's
is,
good.
and it is an
Yeah.
inside job. And
Mhm.
I think it takes a while for people to recognize that, because their pursuit, you're right about the pursuit of happiness. We're always after the thing or the person or whatever. Some, I guess a good example that I can give of that, and I said I don't mean to demean my mother, but her
Mhm.
also, she, people made her happy or they made her frustrated or they made her, she never stopped to consider that it was her, it was her, how she reacted to those people, that made the difference. It was an inside job. And so
Yeah.
that's what I grew up learning. Everything was everybody else's fault. How I felt was everybody's fault
Hmm.
mine. I never
Yeah.
considered that it was me. And then finally, when I did, I went, "Oh my God, why did it take me so long to get this?" I was
Yeah.
probably about 40 when that occurred to me.
But it's true. And it's not just grandma who had that. It's
Oh
well, it's
no.
somebody else's fault, because I'm not happy right now, and it's your fault because you don't do this for me, you don't do that, or you did this over there. And I'm still in reaction about it. But it is really up to us as the individual to define whether or not no one can make you miserable. That's all on you. That's all on your own plate. And it's amazing that a simple shift in perspective can lead you in a whole other direction. And I remember having a conversation not too long ago with my students, my yoga nidra students, and we were talking about choices and actual we were in pursuit of happiness, but the eternal happiness within. And I said, we're all on a path. We're all on our own little road, and it zigs and zags. It's not a straight road. The only straight road
No.
anywhere is man-made.
Yeah.
Everything else in nature just kind of ebbs and flows. And really, this is what we're meant to do through life. Nature is a great reflection for that for us. Um, but I said, at some point you come to an intersection where you can go right and take the same reactive pattern you've always taken, and where it's going to lead you, because all those subconscious memories are buried somewhere in your body, in your memories, and they're held in the body. Or you can take a left and just take a different stance, just take a different look at how you are reacting. But catching yourself in the reaction is the first step of self-awareness in the goal of eternal happiness. And then having that be revealed to yourself by, as you had said last episode, I think it was, is just keep digging the same hole. Just keep digging the
Yes.
same hole.
Yeah. Just
But that
because
choice is up to you.
it is. I remember reading a book that I absolutely fell in love with. It was called "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." And it was written by a woman called named Terry Cole Whitaker, and you can still buy it. It's a little paperback edition, and that freed me of thinking of I didn't have to be worried whether I was a people pleaser to get. I wanted to make people happy so that they would treat me better. I didn't have to be a people pleaser anymore.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
until I saw that title, that had never occurred to me.
But trying to please other people, there's no guarantee they're going to treat you better.
No, there isn't.
No, there is none. Well, if I do this, and how much time and energy we spend thinking about, well, if I do this, they're going to do that. And we try and anticipate someone's response to us or someone's reaction to us. And even in that, how curious and how commanding the subconscious mind is, that it even drives our unconscious habits, that we get into situations and we keep on responding, reacting the same way, the same dialogue, different person, same dialogue, different location, same dialogue, different whatever, different job. And we keep perpetuating that until one day we wake up and go, honestly, WTF, what have I been doing? And it's in that growth that we can actually dissolve the memory pain of all those past decisions and all those past choices that we made that led us to the present moment. And we can actually forgive ourselves of those choices. And that just is so freeing, absolutely freeing.
We won't name names on here because
not today. Except Gurudev, we're good.
Yeah, we're good for that. But I'm just thinking of about when you used to work for a certain person and you would come home every day with a story about that person because they were, and I said, you know, if you're giving too much energy, you think about it, but all of your energy that you're putting out is going to whatever that person is you're talking about. And until you make a shift, and you had to, and you went, oh my God, yeah, all of that energy. And that's what happens is for the outside situations. I think we were talking this morning about a personal growth, about something that I'm involved in. It was a webinar first about cosmology with Brian Swim and Matthew Fox. And now I'm involved in something called the Deep Time Network. And so my Monday night groups that I have, and they're all on Zoom, because these people are all over the world. But my focus is pretty much on that, and it has to do with a much greater perspective on life than just what we're carrying around. And Lindsay is staying with me this week, and she overheard the conversation that I was involved in that webinar last night. And she said this morning, I heard you talking, and that just sounded so beautiful to me. She said, you have a beautiful life. And I realized that my focus on those 3 nights of the week for a couple of hours is giving me where my focus is, not on the crazies out there that
there's plenty of those in the world right now. We won't touch on that subject right now.
No. So I'm realizing that I have a whole different focus. I have natural awakenings. I have this, our podcast to look forward. And I don't think about those things that much. Not like I did when they first started.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You mentioned that. Well, first I want to say Lindsay Berkson, who is like the end all be all in hormones for women. And I will include a link to her website because she has an amazing podcast as it is. So if you're a woman, or no matter where and what stage you are in your life, you definitely need to go find Lindsay's work, because modern medicine has done a great disservice to women who in our aging process, from perimenopausal all the way through, and what to do with women who are post-menopausal, excuse my pronunciation, but really out of curiosity for your own healthy aging process, go find her work. And hopefully we can have her on as a guest at some point.
She will be a guest. She lectures and most of the time that she's out on. That's what she's seeing patients here at Naples Center for Functional Medicine. But normally she's on the road flying around lecturing, teaching doctors, because she said they don't teach menopausal medicine in medical school. And
No, and as we learned, the only way they get it is for 1 hour, and that's if they are going to be specializing in OBGYN work. That's it.
yeah, that's
Otherwise, it's
it.
not taught. And we're more than half the population of the whole planet, much less, just here in the US.
53% as I think I remember it. But it for women, it'll make all the difference in the
Yeah.
world. Tune in when we have her.
Yeah,
That's really
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I wanted to mention that for our listeners, but I also wanted to mention that lesson about, putting energy towards someone. I wanted to share, because I won't name names, but there's someone who I'm still friends with today. And when we worked together on the Westerdam, that part I can name. But she and I would get together every single day. We had a particular individual on board that we had to work with, and he was new to the company and new to the ship, and he just started to make our lives very challenging. And every day she and I would literally get a glass of wine and go sit off the back deck and talk about this person. And I remember calling you one day. And back then I was based out of Fort Lauderdale. You were in Naples. And so you could come over to visit, in which you did frequently. But
Did, yeah.
on this particular day, I called you and was telling you about, oh my God, and then he did this, and oh my God, then he did that. And you said to me, your words are energy. And by the two of you constantly talking about him, you are actually feeding him, you are empowering him more with your words. So if you want to disempower him, then stop talking about him. So I took that lesson back, and I told her, this woman,
Uh-huh.
about what you had suggested. And she said, okay, let's make a pact. So if we start off, obviously we have to work with this person. So
Yeah.
we have to talk about them because we need things for this person to do for us. But at the same time, no more, if we have wine, we're going to enjoy the sunset. We're going to enjoy, we're looking at the ocean, and we're going to watch the birds, and we're just going to, enjoy and appreciate and give gratitude for where we were at, and the
Oh,
gifts
awesome.
of the work we were in.
Mhm.
And so we would just basically have this cancel. We'd hey, you're starting. Okay, stop. And then switch gears, switch topics, and shifting the perspective on the situation. And, eventually that person was transferred off of our ship and eventually got fired. So I'm not saying that, us changing
Oh,
our
no.
language, did that, but you could really feel how the energy not being fed towards him, but to positive things and appreciating other things in our working environment, that and our friendship that we were developing. That was something that really helped a lot, was that energy shift. And that was a really great lesson. And then because we keep perpetuating stuff, different person, different environment, many years later, I remember coming home almost every single day. This is when I was working on land by this time.
Yeah.
And telling you stories about a particular person. And all of a sudden, one night at dinner, I just remembered that lesson from years before. And I remember stopping myself and saying, oh my God, how boring am I? I've come home every single day with these stories about this person, my frustration. So not only am I giving him and empowering him more, but I'm boring. And in the words of Frank Berry, one of my favorite comedians on ships, he'd say, if you're bored, you're being boring. So I remember and from that day forward, I never came home with another
No, you
story.
didn't.
Nope. Nope. And then eventually he got fired too.
No, we're not saying to get somebody fired. You should. No, we're
No,
not saying that.
no,
No.
no. It wasn't negative. It was definitely not. I mean, obviously the whining and the whinging about, oh my gosh, this person's making my life miserable. But I was empowering him.
Yeah.
Those people had power and influence because I gave it to them. And then when I made different choices, I became a much happier person in my own growth.
It 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 does take a while to break habits.
Mm-hmm.
And you can slip back into them very easily without even thinking about it, because your subconscious mind is sort of running all the time.
Runs the show.
And so it's not an easy thing. And it's like some people wear those. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody have those rubber bands that,
Oh, let's
that
stop
they,
smoking or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, well, they work just as well if you're trying to break those kind of habits. Or those little sticky at home, all those little sticky things that you put on your mirror as
Yeah.
reminders, yeah, to make new habits,
To break old habits, because
to break.
those habits are in some way they've protected you for your survival, but
Hmm.
we're not under attack at this point in life, although some days we feel like we are, but we really are not. And most times in there, do people do things intentionally to hurt others? Absolutely. But you can choose how you receive the words that and what they say. And now it's gotten, I think, even sometimes more challenging because we spend so much time texting and
Yeah.
emailing, and you miss the energetic interaction with somebody else. So you can't always read. Like if you're in a really crappy mood and you get a text message about something that normally wouldn't bother you, all of a sudden, boom, you're triggered. Well, whose fault is that? That's yours, because you reacted when that person who sent the text was just, hey, I'm in a hurry. They didn't tell you that, but they were just typed it, or they were, talking into the phone while they were driving, and voice, autocorrect just took over and things went horribly wrong.
And you have to replace when you get trying to get rid of a bad habit or an old habit, you have to have a new habit that replaces that. There's one thing that I have learned, that's a lesson I've learned the hard way, is that something has to replace, because you have to build those new neural pathways,
Hmm.
because otherwise when you're done your 30 days of trying to a new habit, it's just goes away, because there's
Hmm.
not enough of the connection there for the new habit to take over. So
That's an excellent point. And I use some of that in my yoga nidra classes and in my yoga nidra sessions with people, because I'll ask them to consider something that they know that they're aware of that's been holding them back. And then visualize themselves letting go of it and freeing it from themselves. And then in the spaciousness left behind, what do you want to replace it with? What higher
right.
vibration emotion or higher vibration feeling do you want to fill that space with? Because I do believe in the strength of and the power of emptiness, but there are people who fear emptiness. So what can you fill it with? Not more of the same that's been holding you back, but something that is a higher vibration. And we know the vibration of energy when it comes time for, Dr. Emoto's work, and the power of words and how the
Mm.
vibration of words coming out of the body can impact another person. Even water, it changes the molecular structure of water. So why would your body be any different? So why not replace it with a new habit?
Habit,
Not
one
good
that
or
you
bad, just a new habit.
just a new habit. My friend Jill used to put those. She had these little words that she put on the side of her water bottles. They were stickies,
Uh-huh.
and they said, they all about love and gratitude or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, it definitely works. And Dr. Emoto's work is pretty profound.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of his book, but I read it and I interviewed him,
Hmm.
so
Yep.
for an
Great stuff.
article that I was so glad to be able to talk to him. He was Japanese, so he did not speak a lot of English. So I
Hmm.
had to have a translator for that one.
I think his book is Messages in Water, but I'll put that
Yes.
into,
Yeah.
the comments below so people can go click on that and take a look at his work. Because if your body, well, not your body, but all of our bodies are at least 70% water, and he did those studies with just water itself and photographed all of it, why would you respond differently, or your body respond differently than that jug of water, that container of water? So taking that same kind of concept about, well, visualizing what love or contentment or peace or joy or happiness, what those feel like, and feel it fully, and then to change your own cellular structure is a pretty cool thing.
I've reconnected with a woman that I interviewed probably maybe 5 years ago. and she wrote a book called The Secret of Your Cells. And, our
Hmm.
cells are mostly water.
Hmm.
And she's teaching a course now that has to do with that, the things that she found out about the elements, and how we come from stardust and what's in our bodies.
Hmm.
And we'll have her on as a guest sometime in the future. She'll join us.
Love that. I love
Yeah.
that. I was talking to um Robert. I have to think about how I'm going to call him because I'm so used to calling him Nalene.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, I call my husband Nalene. His
Nelly.
birth name is Robert. But Nalene is how I met him. And Nalene is his Sanskrit name because I met him at the ashram. And we all have a Sanskrit name when you are a follower of these lineage of teachings. Mine is Shanti Priya. So people from the ashram still call me Shanti, but that's mine. Yours is Mohini.
No, it's Sohini.
Oh, Sohini. Sorry, Sohini.
It's
But I was
music.
talking to him about growth versus happiness. And when I first presented the topic to him and let him know we were going to be talking about this today, and he said, "Why does it have to be growth versus happiness?" He said, "Why can't you have them both simultaneously?" And I thought, if we actually brought happiness, if we understood the complexity of happiness that but also at the same time the simplicity of happiness that was within us, and that we could choose happiness even in times of growth, it would transform growth faster. And we would leave behind, as I mentioned before, the memory pain of the past. So why not have them coexist?
They do coexist. And for myself, I use the word contentment because I'm just content with things as they are now. I mean, I don't know that there's a difference between a feeling of happiness and a feeling of contentment. I think sometimes a cat, when it purrs, is
Uh-huh.
content.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Or
Yeah.
you can have a good meal and feel satiated and content
Yeah.
with things. And so I just feel like for myself, that's what I'm after at this part of my life. And when you get to where I am, you don't don't want a lot of things. You've had, accomplished things in your life, and you have
Mhm.
a house, I have a yard, I have, and so I don't have a lot of things to pursue for happiness. So
You don't have to run
contentment.
very far.
No, I just got to go outside. As Lindsay said this morning, I have a beautiful life.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you knew then what you know
Mm,
now,
yeah.
what is one thing that you would, and not that you could ever go back and change things, but if you knew then what you knew now, what's one thing in your life that would be undone?
I would I would not have had all that anxiety. I told you I live with high levels of anxiety,
Hmm.
high levels most of my life. I was split. I was always thinking about the what I'm going to do in the future, how things have been in the past. And then there was the me in the present. And because of that, I have few memories of really good, solid memories because everything was blanketed by anxiety. And
Hmm.
so, oh my God, I mean, when I get to the point in my life where I'm at now, I'm like, it's just wonderful not to live with that. It's very, very freeing not to
Hmm.
have other people's voices in your head about what you should do, what you could do. You're not feeling like you're beholding to people. It's such a joy not to have a lot of anxiety. And I know that there is a lot of anxiety in the world today, a
Yeah.
lot of it. I keep reading about the mental health of
Hmm.
people, and maybe that's where we get to the ketamine part. um but that is the one thing I would have given up in a minute, in a heartbeat, is not to
Hmm.
have had the anxiety that I had.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
about you?
Well, I asked you that question and I was not expecting you to ask me the same question, but obviously turnaround's fair play.
Yeah.
Um, well, my life, obviously growing up under your tutelage, because I was introduced to a lot of this at a much younger age than you,
Hmm.
I had the benefit of having some of these lessons along the way.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you, I mean, Kripalu was part of our world.
Yes.
Krishnamurti became part of our world. Vedanta became part of our world. Understanding other religions became part of our world. So travel was a big part of my world. So a lot of these things I think were almost lessons in real time that I was able to um I think I've evolved with those lessons and I understand them now because at the time, Krishnamurti was definitely not up my alley. I was as a teenager. Maybe if I had been born in India, a different story, but I was, an American girl that was definitely not part of, our world growing up. So I think that I was the gift of grace was a huge part of it because I could bring a lot of that with me. Because anxiety was never an issue with me. But I think if I could take what I have evolved into the moment I am now and put it back into a lesson that I could have applied to, I think I would have stepped into my own much earlier on when I in my career on cruise ships. I feel like I would have owned who I was much more then, and been more comfortable in my own skin and not cared so much about some of the comments that passengers would write in the comment cards. Um, because in that kind of environment you're constantly live in the moment. I mean, as a cruise director I worked one day or one cruise in advance, so I didn't have a whole lot. I was because people were right in front of you, you didn't have much choice in the matter. And
Yeah.
sometimes you had to react because you'd have a bright start, which meant there's a medical emergency and you had to drop what you did and run because I was part of that team. um and I think for that I had a sense of self, but I believe that as a cruise director, I would have had a more expansive sense of self and not trying to emulate somebody else's ways of doing that job. I felt like I owned it, but I felt that I could have been more of myself in it and not worried so much about those comment cards and taking those things personally because there was some
Yeah.
that's tough. That's tough to read sometimes.
Didn't I save some of those? I thought I found them someplace. They were copies of them. Didn't I give them to you for Christmas one year?
You did, and I still have some that I had saved, but I don't know if what you gave me was lost in the hurricane. I don't
Oh, okay.
yeah, there's
Because
some
I
things
had
I still haven't gone digging for just
mhm. I didn't know how I got those. I mean, I had them and they were folded up, and I when I came across them, I went, "Oh, these are comment letters from
Mhm.
from people who sailed with you."
Yeah.
So, and I was going to say, I had friends that used to call Krishnamurti
Oh,
Murky, because
because you had to work for it.
they had you had to work for him, yes.
Yeah, you
And
had to work for it.
I remember when you called home and said they wanted you to take the cruise director's job because something had happened. I can't remember if somebody got sick, had to
Hmm.
leave the ship. What was it?
Yeah, the cruise director. I
Yeah.
was on the Statendam then, and we were doing 16-day cruises from San Pedro out of California to Hawaii and back. And the cruise director that I was working with at the time, his wife had to have back surgery and they had kids. So he needed
Oh,
to leave and come back east and take care of the house and the kids so she could have the surgery. So he had gone to the office and said, I guess, well, I didn't know he did that, but he went and said, I want Yvette needs to do the job. So,
And I remember the fear that struck in your heart.
oh
It was
my
like,
Lord.
God. Yeah. So that's what you mean if you would have had more confidence in your
Yeah.
own self. Yeah. In
Yeah.
your own
Yeah.
skills and talents and natural abilities. Yeah.
Well, I remember sitting in Subway in San Pedro that day, and the turnaround day when he was leaving and I was going to be taking
Oh,
over, because he had said, or was our last Hawaii port, and he said, you need to go call the office. And I said, what for? And he said, just go call Ann. Ann McAlpin was our boss back then, and she
yeah.
was so
Yeah.
awesome. So I called her, and she said, we're going to have you step up and, take over the role of cruise director. And I was basically dead silence. I said, are you sure? And she said, yes. We said, we've been asking you for the longest time. And she said, now is your time. And so then I had the days back from Hawaii to San Pedro to really watch what he did. Cause I did my
Oh.
own job. I wasn't paying attention to what he did and all the
Uh,
intricacies of the daily program and all that kind of stuff that now today they have admin help. But back then I
yeah.
did all that. That was part of the cruise director's job. So I had that turnaround day. I was sitting in Subway with my friend Denise,
Oh, okay.
and I just, all of a sudden it hit me like a bolt of lightning. And I just said to her, like, I can feel goosebumps now. I said, oh my
Yeah.
God, in 5 hours, I have to walk on stage as the cruise director. What am I going to do? And she was so awesome. She's like, Yvette, you have this, you could have been doing this long ago, but you didn't, but you got this. So I walked out on stage that night and I did what I'd seen other cruise directors do, and I went to go copy them. And I went out on stage that first night for introductions. But once I got through the very first beginning, it was like I just fell into it. It just seemed so natural. So
I,
natural.
I used to
Yeah.
say that it wasn't a job, it was just who you were.
Hmm.
You invited somewhere between 3 and 4,000 people every day to your home.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And interesting, that first cruise, that was a 16-day Hawaii. Our last port, I had planned this big sail away party. And there's a tradition in Hawaii that if you toss your flower lei into the ocean and it washes ashore, you are destined to return to Hawaii.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
at Holland America, we have a zero overboard policy. So I wasn't having my passengers throw their leis overboard. So I had this big party up on the Lido, and then we all got up there and tossed our leis into the pool. And
Oh,
we
okay.
figured that if they washed up on the side of the pool, then we were destined to return to Hawaii. It was a great sail away party. My whole staff, we were out there. People were taking pictures of us. We were dancing, had a great time. 24 hours later, the captain calls me and he says, Yvette, we're turning the ship around. And I said, you're joking, right? He said, no. He said, we have a medical emergency
Oh,
and it's life and death. It's life and death. And I said, well, can't they call Coast Guard? Can't they come out and get him that way? And he said, no, we're too far out and it's too rough for Coast Guard. So we turned the ship around. We went all the way back to Hilo. We docked the ship, got the guy off, saved his life. And then we turned around and set back to San Pedro. But we also meant that was another 24 hours longer for the cruise. So I had
but you
to,
went back to Hawaii. You went back
well,
later.
I did go back. Thanks a lot for that reminder.
It worked.
It did work. It did work. But I remember saying to the guests, talk about a perspective shift. And this is why I'm going to go full circle with what I said earlier, is that a lot of these lessons were already implanted in me
Mhm.
organically because of how the things you introduced me to. But this cruise was now an extra day longer, which meant the following cruise was going to be one day shorter.
Shorter.
It also meant that everybody who was supposed to get off, we had to make arrangements for flights, trains, rental cars, hotels,
Oh.
open up the phone lines. They
Uh,
could call their
uh,
families to let them know. So every passenger had to be rebooked. Everybody had to be rebooked. Some people didn't care. Others were not so happy
so
about it.
happy.
And I remember getting up on stage because there were people who were disgruntled, and I don't know if I did it at Showtime or I did it in. No, it wasn't Showtime. It was in Showtime because I remember saying it twice, and I said, I just want to say that I know some of you don't really care. Some of you are happy you get an extra day on your cruise, but at the same time, isn't it great to know that you are sailing on a cruise line that will do whatever it can to save your life? That person could have been your
Yeah.
father, your brother, your uncle. And because of what the captain chose to do, that man has
Yeah.
lived. And it was if this big sigh just rolled across the whole ship. And my ratings at the end of the cruise were as good as the cruise director I replaced, who was a number one in the fleet at the time.
Oh,
And the office was like, "What did you do?" And I just said, I told the truth. I told the truth. Yep.
what a
So,
nice memory.
yeah,
What a nice memory.
that was my first cruise as cruise director. And I thought, "Phew,
That was the
that's,
first one. Oh my
that was my
God.
first cruise as cruise director." Yeah. Everybody else was 7-day Alaska, 7-day Caribbean, but Yvette, no, 16-day Hawaii that becomes a 17-day Hawaii. I get an email from one of my friends who's a cruise director, fellow cruise director, and he says, "If you can do this, you can do
Do
anything."
anything.
Yeah.
That's a real initiation.
Yeah. Yeah. So those lessons that were seed planted in me
And me,
by
yeah,
Krishnamurti when I really
Bernie.
had no idea what he was talking about was about a shift in perspective and how
Yeah.
to shift your perspective and share it with other people so that they get the benefit of that shift as well. Yep.
So, shall we talk about ketamine because that
Yeah.
that can help shift someone's perspective? And
Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely. So I know that ketamine has become a real front runner these days for people to use as a tool as a journey inward. People have used it for trauma,
they use
from
it for PTSD now.
Yes, yes. And I know that there's been a lot of webinars recently with people like Andrew Weil, Deepak Chopra, Wim Hof. These are all people who are front runners and big supporters of psychedelics. Because people have been leaving the country for the past number of years to go to, Central America and do
Mexico, yeah.
ayahuasca. But in the fact that this has become a viable way to help people recover from many things,
Hmm.
um, we wanted to talk about ketamine. And I know that we'll be having Dr. Carol Roberts on our next podcast. And so she'll be joining us to talk about what it's like to be a facilitator. But do you want to share anything about your ketamine experiences and what, number one, I say why you chose to experiment with the ketamine and journey with that, and then what the results were, what the realizations were that came?
There were, and one of the reasons why that I did it was because Carol and Dr. Roberts had been doing it. She was trained by Alberto Villolda
Mm-hmm.
as a shaman,
Mm-hmm.
and so they had been talking about setting up clinics to do just the ketamine therapy. So she'd been talking about it for so long. I just got used to it, and I thought, well, maybe I should explore myself. And we had just so people know, there's a clinic in Bonita Springs. It's called My Self Wellness. Um, and they do ketamine therapy there. They have um, uh, a psychiatrist on staff, and they give theirs intravenously. They put
An
whatever you call it.
IV.
Yeah, they do theirs
Oh,
IV.
oh,
Whereas Carol does just at least we did. I think you can do it by drink. You can do like a little sugar cube, or else you can do it by injection.
mm-hmm.
Mine that I did was by the drink.
Mhm.
And I did it. So anyhow, that was the reason I did it, was because I felt secure doing it, because I knew Carol, and I knew she wouldn't lead me astray. And I went to Sarasota to participate, and we were a small group. There were 5 women who were
Mhm.
there, and the woman's house who hosted us had enough bedrooms for everybody, or you could go out on the deck. I didn't want to go out because I didn't want the noise. I didn't want the sun. I wanted to, to feel it, and I didn't want to be distracted by neighbors mowing their lawn.
Uh-huh.
So anyhow, it's I really don't know how long it takes, but I'm thinking we were probably there for half the day, doing till you uh, start sit in circle in the beginning
Mhm.
and do a little sharing and have a little bit of a ritual, and then take the drink and go lay down. Then I think it's probably, so that's part of the ritual, and is the sharing afterwards. You all, after you come out of it, so to speak,
Mhm.
you can go and sit, and everybody shares with what the journey was like.
Mhm.
For myself, again, it's like the anxiety leaves a little bit more each time that I
Mhm.
do something. There's less, I'm less anxious about something in the present moment than I was before I did that.
Mhm.
So I had a really interesting experience in that there was no me.
Mhm.
That might scare a lot of people, but um, I wasn't a person. I wasn't a personality. I just was all that there is. And it was a wonderful experience to know that there's something else beyond where we think that who we think we are.
Mhm.
We have been misled by, I want to say, by religion. And I don't say any religion. I don't
Mhm.
say any particular one. But I think in some cases it's done us an injustice, because we're so stuck in the world that physical world we live in. And it's all about, as Brian Swim says, it's all about getting to heaven. It's not about
Mhm.
enjoying life here.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's repent. You got to do this so that you don't go to hell. You got to do this so you can go to heaven. And so that's what people run after.
Mhm.
And we are already what we seek.
Mhm.
So that was my lesson.
That's
You've tried it.
beautiful.
Hmm.
Yes. Yep, I have tried it. And I've also facilitated during a ketamine retreat weekend as well. So I had the benefit of both. And what led me to try the ketamine was number one, you had your journey and with Carol. So it was a safe experience. That's always, what you wonder is,
Yeah.
how safe will I be? Because when you are in that experience, you're extremely vulnerable. So you really are opening yourself up to a level of vulnerability and realizations about the self, which you don't always know what's going to appear, right?
Yes.
Um, but I think the first time I tried it, well, actually, not I think I know the first time I tried it, I too had gone to Sarasota under your recommendation and talking to Carol and had my journey. But the reason why I did it was because with the injury that I had sustained at the start of this year, I was so debilitated with sciatica that the pain I was in, and with my training in yoga therapy as a facilitator, but understanding the complexity that the body keeps score. And I had felt that with all the recovery, the physical work of the hurricane and the not getting the rest that I needed just began to build up. But I knew that there was something that was energetically stored in my body that really needed to go. And it was telling me through this horrible sciatica. I mean, I could barely stand up for more than 5 minutes at a time before I had to lay down on, on the floor and try and, alleviate that. But so I wanted to try the ketamine to find the source of where this pain was coming from. And I don't I don't think in my experience, the first one that I felt universal consciousness like you did, but I came to the realization that I had given my power away and needed to take my power back. Um, I also came to the realization that because the injury and the pain was on my right side, that's my masculine side, which has been the dominant force in my life. And my feminine, my left side, needed to support the left. And I needed to allow my body to nurture the left, nurture the right, the feminine, nurture the masculine. Whereas my whole life, my masculine had been that forward facing in my work that I had done. So those were the two biggest lessons in what I came out of the ketamine with that realization. And the experience that I did was with an injection, which was within
Wow.
5 minutes, boom, I was in the experience, and then went deeper. But I brought my own, I went into a room by myself, and I brought my own music with me. So, and music that
Oh,
I was familiar with that I used in my own meditation practice. So I, it, there was I knew where that was it could take me, the potential. And then I was hoping that the ketamine would take me further into it versus, keeping me in an alpha state, but really to go deeper inward.
I just had a realization of my own from you telling that story. And that was all of my injuries that I had ever had. I fell and hurt my knee. I hurt my toe. I had a frozen shoulder. They were all on the left. I never had anything on the right. And that's the feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I fell when I fell into the fire pit in the
Mm-hmm.
backyard and gashed my head, it was on the
Mm-hmm.
right side.
Mm-hmm.
So I never realized that until you just said that it had, and that, that was a terrible gash. So,
Yes, it was.
yes. So do you have a minute? Are you busy?
My gosh. Are you
Well,
working? Do you have
are you,
yeah. What's up?
I fell and hurt my head. So anyway, yeah, it does. I mean, that it's something about that, about ketamine opens up your subconscious and
Yeah.
your conscious mind together. And I know that the clinic up here in Bonita Springs, I have interviewed extensively the gentleman who operates that clinic. I met
Mhm.
the psychiatrist, and I met the man who does like the PR. He had addictions. He had 6 addictions. I mean, he said he was just overrun with them. And
Mhm.
he weighed 300 pounds. If you'd see him now, you'd never ever believe it.
Mhm.
And he did the ketamine treatments. It wasn't, he didn't do just one. I mean, they recommend a series of, I think it's either 5 or 6.
Mhm.
And when he was done, he never did drugs again. He never smoked again. He never, no, he's clean as a whistle, lost weight. And he's one of the biggest proponents and talks
Yeah.
about how valuable ketamine can be. So,
It is extremely valuable. And the one thing I learned from facilitating during that ketamine retreat was that in any yoga practice or yoga nidra or yoga therapy, it is all intention based. And whether you want to call it an intention and an affirmation, and I know that if we sat down and talked about that subject, I know that
yeah.
I would go into there are two different things.
Yes, yes.
You've got goal setting, you have so there's but what's so important, it is if you want to see results, it without any argument, it must be an intention
Tension.
based experience. And I remember because of facilitating, I know going to my own ketamine experience, the first one, I had the intention of going to the source of where my pain
Uh-huh.
was, coming from. And then in facilitating, because the days were started with my yoga and yoga nidra classes, for the group, that was all intention based. And I would ask them to bring whatever intention they set for themselves in their yoga practice, in their yoga nidra, to bring that into their ketamine journey for the day. And then on the last day, I did, Lillian and I facilitated a breath work, an integral breath therapy, or if you want to call it holotropic breath, which is more commonly known. But we did a session, and that too was all intention based. In the sharing afterwards, everyone said how beneficial having an intention in this practice, in the experience of the ketamine, amplified their journey in everything that they did. So that's, if anybody has ever been and tried ketamine, or ever is going to be considering it, set an intention, an intention to let go of that which holds you back in order to bring in healing, transformation, whatever it is that you want to fill that space, and that transforms everything for you in that journey, everything.
One of the things that I will point out, because I've read it and I've watched documentaries on it, is that they give this to patients who are dying, and they no longer have a fear of death because they know where they're going.
Yeah.
And I think that is beautiful. Then people can die more peacefully, but then people can live, who are living, can live more freely. So it has a wonderful effect. And I just think it's a great thing, and people should use it. And I say, because anything that helps with anxiety is, in my book, is a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The end all be all.
That's right.
Well, I think if you're okay with it, we can wrap up here, because you want to hold some of this juice for the squeeze with Carol next episode. Is there any final comments you want to share with our listeners about, growth, happiness, or the transformative power of ketamine?
I would say that the growth, as long as there's spirituality that's part of it, can lead, does lead. I'll speak as a testimonial. It does lead to happiness or contentment, however you want to put that. And that's I can't say enough about it, because my life is so different. It's so changed from the way it used to be. I'm thrilled. Just thrilled that I can be at peace. That is the one thing, to be at peace and have contentment. So.
Peace in the midst of chaos.
In the midst of chaos. Yes.
Yep.
How
Let
about
the
you?
chaos flow around you. Well, I was, peace in the midst of chaos is just allowing the busyness of life to swirl around you, to observe it and not be of it, but just not be emotionally attached to it, and to really reprogram. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I have seen from myself, is just reprogramming myself, is just taking the old computer and just reprogramming it with just different perspective, a major and a massive perspective shift. That has been the greatest gift of just, 2 degrees to the left, 2 degrees to the right, 2 degrees up, 2 degrees down, and just look beyond what's, see the forest for the trees, that kind of.
You have to observe the forest first. So observe or detaching yourself from your thoughts, and just realizing that they're not who you are. You just observe them. That's the only way that you can let go of them. You have to recognize them first.
And I also, just in case I forget to mention this when we are with Carol in our conversation, is that when I was asked to facilitate with the ketamine retreat, they wanted me to teach yoga every day, and then to close off with a breathwork session. And they wanted the breathwork session so that people could realize that you can actually get to the same place within yourself through intense breath work. And I'm not talking, nostril breathing, an open mouth breath practice. So and Wim Hof is big on this at this point in time. He's gotten quite famous as a result of it. But the psychotherapists who were involved in this retreat really wanted people to understand that the power of that lies in your own hands. And then through the discussions leading up to the retreat, I said, I really want to teach yoga nidra as part of the mornings. And that was not something that they had approached me about. They only wanted the yoga and the breath work. But because I have had those kinds of experiences in my yoga nidra practice, my meditation practice, I also know that that journey, that ketamine journey that's instigated by the medicine, I've gotten there in yoga nidra as well. And what was amazing in that retreat was the people who I facilitated my classes for, they understood that because they got there too. Free of the ketamine.
Love yoga nidra. Can't say enough about 30 years with yoga nidra.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we'll wrap up this week of Space Bar, Mindful Pauses for Conscious Conversations. My name is Yvette. I'm the daughter.
And my name is Linda, and I'm the mom.
To our listeners, stay tuned for our next episode. And remember, don't count the days, make the days count.